Stop storing random ingredients and start building a smarter prepper pantry. A pantry that really comes through and saves the day in real emergencies and real life. Hey guys, it's Cheddar with Wicked Prepared. One of my favorite ways to build a pantry that really works is meals in a bag. These little emergency meal kits contain everything you need to make a complete meal. When the you-know-what hits the fan, you're not stuck trying to figure out what you're going to make with buckets of beans and rice and endless cans of tuna fish and peanut butter. You just grab a bag off the shelf and easily prepare a family favorite meal. These meals are so good that you're not going to want to wait for an emergency, and you don't have to. These bags are equally great for hectic nights when you realize you don't have a dinner plan or your dinner plans fell apart. The meal I'm sharing today is a twist on the classic family favorite cheesy chicken and rice casserole. I'm kind of combining it with another family favorite, tacos, for a cheesy taco chicken and rice casserole. Let's get started and I'll show you how I do it. So these are all the ingredients that we need for this meal. This is a pretty simple recipe. So I've got my chicken here. This is a 28-ounce can of Keystone chicken. Now if you check out the label here, it says this is like 14 servings of meat, which I think that's a little bit... That would be pretty small servings. This is the size can I usually use for like a 9x13 casserole dish meal. So that's what I'm using. They also have a smaller can, and this says that it has 6 servings. So if you wanted to be a little more conservative, you could use a 14-ounce can like this, or you could also use like the larger short cans that they have at Walmart or the grocery store, maybe 2 of those at least. Whatever you want to do for your meat is fine. And then I've got a couple of cans of soup here. So I've got a cheddar cheese soup and a cream of chicken soup. And I've got a regular size can of chicken broth. Now keep in mind some of these ingredients, if you want to cut the sodium down, you can get most of these in reduced sodium versions. Sodium's not an issue for most healthy people, but if your doctor has asked you to be on reduced sodium for high blood pressure or something, then you might want to do something like that. And then of course I've got my rice. And this is minute rice. It's instant minute rice. It doesn't have to be minute rice brand, but instant rice is what you want. And it's about 2 cups. What I did is I just took my wide mouth pint jar and I filled it up to the tippy top. And then I kind of tapped it down and settled it down a little bit and added some more. I got this jar just as full as I could because we've got plenty of liquid in this recipe to handle all the rice. So we want to make sure we don't end up with a soupy dish. So I put this as full as I could get it. And then of course I've got my taco seasoning. So this is kind of what inspired me to make this recipe, this cheesy taco seasoning. I'd never seen this before. I don't think it's new. I think it just wasn't on my radar. So I saw somebody using this in a recipe and it kind of got my wheels turning and thinking I'd like to do a cheesy taco chicken and rice bake. So that's what I decided to do. And then here I've got my cheddar cheese. So this is going to be for the topping on the casserole. I feel like most casseroles kind of need a topping. So this is freeze-dried shredded cheddar. And what I did here is I put this into a 3/4 of a pint jar. These were hard to find because Ball had discontinued them, but I have a new source for them. I'll put it down below for you. The reason I did this is I wanted this little bit of extra airspace because I want to be able to just rehydrate this cheese right in the jar and not need to use an extra bowl or bag or anything like that. So I just filled up this jar. I did, my canister was about empty, so I did have to open a new can of cheese when I was filling this. So that's what I did. But also, if you are a person who likes, real food, this is real cheddar cheese. It's just got the moisture taken out. It's real cheese. It's a great item to have in your prepper pantry. So you could do a little more cheese if you wanted and not just put it on the top. You could stir some into the casserole as well. But I'm using this for the topping. There's a couple other options you could use for topping if you wanted. One thing I really, really love to use for a casserole topping is French fried onions. And Dollar Tree sells a bag of French fried onions that's the perfect size to top your typical 9x13 casserole. But I didn't really feel like the French fried onion would really go well with the taco. So I didn't want to use that today, but there is a different option. You could use these crispy jalapenos, which is kind of the same idea. These are sold in like the salad toppings aisle. And this would give you a nice crispy topping. I had these on my salad a few nights ago though, and they were a little spicier than I expected them to be. So I didn't really dare to top the whole casserole with these right off the bat because I wasn't sure how spicy it would be. I think something like Doritos, crushed up Doritos, would be a really great and fun topping for this as well. But the only thing about something like Doritos, they're not going to have as long of a shelf life in this bag meal as the rest of the ingredients. So this is something if you did use an option like this, you'd want to make sure that if you hadn't used this bag within, 6 months or so, maybe a year, I would go 6 months, that you'd want to at least rotate out this ingredient. So at least take this out, eat it for a snack, send it in somebody's lunch, and replace it with a fresh bag. All of the rest of the ingredients should stay good for much longer than that, several years on the shelf at least. You could add an oxygen absorber to these 2 jars if you wanted them to last longer. I might add one to the cheese if I was planning on keeping this on the shelf more than like a year, or vacuum seal. I think the rice would be fine for a good long time without needing any kind of treatment. But if you do have a vacuum sealer, it doesn't hurt to go ahead and vacuum seal them anyways. One other thing that I am going to put in my bag is a disposable foil pan. Now this is a 9x13 pan. I actually really like these because they seem pretty sturdy. I don't have to really support the bottom as much. I'll put a link if I can remember which ones these were. I think I got them on Amazon in a big bulk box. They're great for meals in a bag. They're great for if you're giving, somebody a casserole or something and you don't want to worry about getting your dish back. But I'm putting this in here just in case if it was an emergency situation where we didn't have, running water, hot running water, I might not want to have to do extra dishes. So even on a busy night, you might not want to have to do extra dishes. And also the possibility that a lot of times people give these bags away. So if you're giving this away to somebody you don't know what they might have in their home or in their kitchen or wherever they were. Sometimes we take these camping, so it can be nice to have this pan. I also folded up 1 sheet of aluminum foil to put with the pan, just in case, I needed to cover the pan in the oven, which I don't think I will, but sometimes you do have to do that. Or just to be able to have something to cover the pan after you're done eating. Depending on the situation, you might not have something available. A couple other things to think about. This recipe doesn't have any vegetables included. You could stir some vegetables right into this to cook with the casserole, because a lot of cheesy chicken and rice casseroles do have vegetables. I couldn't really think of a vegetable that I really liked to go with the taco theme besides maybe corn, and I didn't really want to put corn in it. So I will probably end up putting an extra veggie in to serve as a side dish. So you could do something like canned, green beans, carrots, any type of canned veggie that your family likes. If you wanted to have some more options, maybe some more nutritious options, you could do something like freeze-dried, like a broccoli or cauliflower. These little bags are kind of perfect for like a single meal, either as an ingredient stirred in or as a side dish served alongside. If you have a really large family, you could do 2 of these little bags. So those are a few options. If you're doing the canned veggies, sometimes things like carrots and spinach, things like that, are a little more nutritious than your typical canned veggies like peas, beans, and corn. But whatever you want, I will probably do a can of green beans to serve with this, just to get that green color. Another thing to think about is your can opener. So I do have a couple of cans that don't have a pop top. The soups, of course, have the pop top. So if everybody should have a manual can opener in their kitchen, in their emergency gear. Sometimes I will drop a little military can opener into each of my meals in a bag if they have cans that need opened. That way, if you do give this away to somebody who doesn't have a can opener, or if you happen to be in a situation where you're stuck without them, you would have a way to open any cans that need opened. All right, so that's what we've got here. So let's go ahead and get these into the bag. All right, so here's my bag. Now, this is the larger of the 2 bag sizes that I tend to use. I get a lot of questions about my bag, so I have a whole sort of explanation about where I get everything, how I set everything up, and all that. So I'll link to that down below the video. So I'm gonna go ahead and add my ingredients. I'm gonna put in my chicken first, and then my rice, my 2 cans of soup, my broth, my cheese, my taco seasoning. And I think for my veggie, I'm gonna do a can of green beans. Now I'm gonna go ahead and slip in my little pan here. And now this bag is all ready to go on the shelf. But I'm not gonna put it on the shelf. I'm gonna fix this meal up for you right now so you can see how it comes together and what it looks like when it's done. Let's go. And before I do anything else, I'm gonna get this cheese started. It doesn't take very long, usually really only 15 to 20 minutes, but I want to make sure that it's good and ready to go by the time the casserole is ready to have it on. So I'm just going to pour my water in slowly and kind of toss it around. I want the water to get, sort of distributed throughout, but this is why I chose this jar with a little bit of extra space so that I can put the lid on and toss it around. So that's about 3.5 tablespoons of water. For a cup of this cheese, that's pretty much what's needed. You can check it as you go and add more if you need it, but that's usually just fine. Depending on what cheese you have, what brand you have, it should give you some guidance on how much, but that's pretty typical. All freeze-dried cheese is pretty much the same thing. So I'm just going to go ahead and set this aside. You can put it in the fridge, but you really don't need to for this amount of time. But I'm going to go ahead and put mine in the fridge just because it's not a power outage and I do have electricity. You can tumble it, a few times during the process just to make sure that the liquid stays evenly distributed. You check it if you feel like it needs a little more water, just a teeny little bit at a time. Even a spritz from a spray bottle will do it. All right, so let's get started with our pan. And the first ingredient I'm going to add is my chicken. And I'm going to do that so I can get it broken up easily. And I'm going to go ahead and add this chicken with all of the juice that's in the can. That's just going to add to our recipe. That's where this can vary a little bit because depending on the can, you may get more or less liquid in it, but it's going to be fine. And the easiest way to do that is pretty much with a meat masher. That'll break this right up really quickly. I don't want to make it too teeny bits of shreds because I like some bigger chunks, but just to get it kind of a little bit started. There we go. So now that this is broken up, I'm going to go ahead and add my 2 cans of soup. Now I'm just going to use my can scraping spatula. That's not really what it is, but that's what I use it for. It's my absolute favorite, one of my most used kitchen tools because it really gets into these pop-top soup cans really well. It gets right up under that rim. You can get right here in this top crevice if you've washed your can, and just right down in the can. It works really, really well. It's been through a lot. I really need to get myself a new one or two. And now before I get started mixing this, I'm going to add the taco seasoning in. There's the cheesy taco seasoning. Smells delish. And I'm not going to put the broth in until I get this started mixing just because I think it will make it harder to mix without making a mess. I could break up any larger chunks of chicken as I'm stirring if I wanted to, but this is going to get stirred a time or two during the baking process, so those chicken chunks will break up a little more on their own. And I personally prefer larger chunks of meat. I don't really love it super duper shredded, so I'm not going to break these up too much because they will break up as the casserole is cooking. And don't worry about any little chunks of soup that don't get really well blended, because that's also going to end up getting melted down and mixed in a little bit better as the casserole is cooking and those couple of times that I'm going to stir it while baking. So now let's just talk real quick about the fact that this is a baked recipe. This is a casserole. So if the power's out, that could be an issue. Now we have several different ways to bake without power. So hopefully you have a way to bake without power. I have a video that talks about, several different options for this, and I'll link that down below as well. But if you do not have a way to bake without power, this can absolutely be made in a pot on the stove or on your emergency burner. So this could be done lots of different ways. A lot of recipes that are supposed to be baked can actually be done in a pot on the stove if you really need to. Everybody should have an emergency stove burner. Everybody should have that, even if you don't have a way to bake. I even showed how you can cook muffins in a pot on a stovetop. So I'll try to link to that video down below as well. Next, I'm going to add in my can of broth. So I'm just going to go ahead and add this broth down in and then give this a gentle mix. It's going to be a little bit hard to stir without making a mess, so just be careful. But this is all the liquid that's going to cook that rice, because the rice is going in uncooked. Actually, because it's minute rice, it's instant rice, it has been cooked and dehydrated, but we've got to add the moisture back in. But it will go a lot faster than it would if it was regular long grain rice. And that you couldn't really substitute those equally necessarily in a recipe like this. You'd have to make some adjustments just because the water and liquid amounts that are needed for instant rice are different than what are needed for regular rice. And speaking of the rice, I'm going to go ahead and add my rice in now. Like I said, I got that super duper packed full. All right, so this is pretty well blended. So this is ready to go into the oven. I'm going to be baking this in my propane camp oven. So I'll show you that. That is my favorite method for baking when the power's out. We actually even use it quite a bit when the power's not out. Like in the summer right now, we don't necessarily want to heat up the kitchen with the indoor oven, or if Mr. Wicked Prepared is doing some some sort of baking and he just wants to stay out of my way when I'm in the kitchen doing something else, we use it quite a bit. So it's a great thing to have. I chose this Camp Chef oven because I knew that it would hold a 9x13 pan. And unfortunately, I'm pretty sure they're not making it anymore. So I'll try to link to some other options that are similar, but I'm not 100% certain on if they hold the 9x13 pan or not. But that's another benefit to using these full pans is you can manipulate the pan a little bit. You can bend the edges up. You can even, bend the pan a little bit if you need to. I've done that before when I'm using some of my other emergency ovens that are smaller and don't necessarily hold a full-size pan. You can manipulate the pans when you use these foil pans. So it's another good reason to use these for your emergency meals. I'm baking this at 375, but it's a super flexible recipe. Like I said, it could even be done on the stovetop. And if you cook it at a higher temperature, that's going to be just fine. It will probably cook quicker. If you cook it at a lower temperature, just going to take a little longer. That's also ideal for emergency cooking because especially with something like a solar oven, for instance, a sun oven, you might not be able to keep the temperature exactly where you want it. That can sometimes be difficult with emergency ovens. In fact, this would be a really good candidate for a sun oven because you could just leave it in kind of longer and just let it go until it was done. So this is a really great flexible recipe for that. And I am not going to cover this. I think it will be fine without being covered. I will keep an eye on it. Like I said, I'm going to stir it a couple of times throughout the baking process. I'll keep an eye on it if it seems like it's going to get too burnt around the edges or something. I do have that foil. I can cover it, but leaving it uncovered is going to allow some of the extra moisture to cook out of it more quickly. And the other thing is, in my experience, when I cover a dish in the oven, it takes a lot longer to kind of heat up and to get where it needs to be. So I'm going to do this without covering it if I can. All right, let's go ahead and get this into the oven. So here is the oven, and it is definitely up to temperature. You could put it in without preheating if you didn't want to waste the fuel. It's not necessary to preheat. In fact, I could turn this down a little bit. We do love that this also has the stove burners on the top, so that's what I'm going to be able to use to warm up my side dish. Okay, it's been about 20 minutes, so I'm just going to take it out and give it a little stir just to kind of distribute the center part into the outside and the outside into the center because the outside cooks faster. All right, I'm going to stick it back in the oven. It's probably going to take at least another 20-25 minutes before it's ready for the topping. All right, it's been another 20 minutes, so now I'm going to see where we're at, see if we're ready to put the topping on. I think I'm going to let it go another 5 or 10 minutes before I add the topping on. Because I don't know how fast the topping's going to brown. I don't want it to get burnt. All right, so while that's having its last 10 minutes, I came in to get my cheese, which is all ready to go. And I also have this, I have some of those crispy jalapenos opened up. And I'm going to sprinkle a few just on a little section of the casserole, just for my own curiosity, just to try it and see how spicy it actually is. So I'm going to put this over the whole thing, and then so the jalapenos over just a little portion of it. So let's get out there and get this thing finished. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start sprinkling my cheese on. And now I'm going to sprinkle these just on a little section, just a few of them. I could have crumbled them up, but there, that'll be good. Now I'll go ahead and get this back in the oven for the final few minutes, just to melt the cheese and crisp up the topping. All right, it's only been a couple of minutes and I can hear it sizzling in there. So I'm going to get this out. All right, here it is, fresh out of the oven. It's super hot. I'm going to let it set for just a couple of minutes so it can cool off a little bit and finish its firming up and getting, a little bit more solid, and then we're going to dig in. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and serve myself a serving. I'm going to take it from the side with the jalapenos because I did want to give this a try and see how it is, see if it's too spicy. So there we go. Look at that gooey cheese. And I'm going to give myself some of these green beans that I warmed up on the camp stove burner that's right on top of the oven. And now it is ready to dig in. All right, let's give this a try. I'm gonna make sure I get some of the jalapeno because that was what I really wanted to see, is how spicy the jalapeno would make it. That's really good. And I don't think it's too spicy. When it's just sprinkled across the topping like this, it's not super heavy. That's really good. Yeah, that's not too spicy. Let me get this big piece of jalapeno here. Really test it out. It's a little spicy. Like if you don't like spicy, I wouldn't use the jalapenos, but it's not really that bad. This is very tasty. I hope this new twist on a classic family favorite will be a welcome addition to your pantry. If you want even more ideas for meals in a bag, I have a whole playlist of recipes that I'll link down below. There's something for every taste. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, leave me chicken taco emojis down in the comments, and I'll leave that meal in a bag playlist right up here so you can check that out next. I'm Jara with Wicked Prepared. Survive today, thrive tomorrow. We'll see you next time.